are listening to KMRELP 102.3 FM in lovely Bellingham, Washington. Your community, your voice, your station. This is Are You Serious? A comedy podcast where local comedians get real, or I guess as real as they want to get. I'm your host, Matt Benoit, and in the studio today we have a very, very tall comedian. He probably hates that I'm introducing him that way. Clay Christofferson. How you doing, Clay?
I'm well. Yeah, I think it'll really play on the air. That'll
Yeah.
be good. If you, for everyone at home now, it's like, how tall though?
Yeah. How tall are you?
I'm 6'7".
6'7". Yeah. If you've never met Clay, he's just a huge bearded guy who with a Norwegian heritage, right? That's Swedish. Okay, now I feel like a total dick.
That's okay. You are a total dick.
In the last year, from 2015 to 2016, I got divorced. I am 6 months out of a 10-year marriage. My wife decided to leave me for her high school boyfriend that she had 10 years prior. And then I got fired. Right. I lost my house. My current roommate gave birth to me. And then I got melanoma. So, that's a lot of sad stuff. And it's also like the worst pickup line I've ever had. But if anybody's into that, if anybody want to work out some daddy issues with a beard that is no longer on purpose, that's kind of the point of this set.
What are your earliest memories of seeing or hearing stand-up? Like, what's your earliest comedy memories?
Oh, comedy memories? Man, I didn't have a interaction with stand-up for a really long time. In fact, almost all the comedy I knew was not stand-up based. Starting out, it was Monty Python and the Holy Grail. My dad would bring home those VHS tapes, and just like your standard band kid or theater kid, I memorized them, could know every joke, and loved that weird sense of humor. I also have problems sleeping, so ever since I was a kid, I would stay up late at night and watch Saturday Night Live was my biggest thing. So sketch comedy was always the first experience I ever had. The first stand-up I ever saw, aside from like little collections from the Best of Johnny Carson DVDs, so like the Tonight Show, or not the DVDs, but like VHS, like you'd see some people doing like 2-minute sets of people that are relatively big. But the first idea of what stand-up comedy was the opening credits to Seinfeld, which every episode starts with Jerry doing like a bit, and then the episode kind of spirals around that theme. But that was like the first viewing of what stand-up really was, because, and then, you know, when you get older, you realize that a lot of the people that you saw on TV shows, like Home Improvement was really big when I was a kid. You know, I would have never known that Tim Allen was a stand-up, like Robin Williams and Hook and things like that. Like everything I experienced first was comedy in a like those comedians that did stand-up doing comedy in a non-stand-up format. You know, the SNL years for me, where I started out, was, you know, Adam Sandler, David Spade, Christopher, like a lot of the stuff where Lorne Michaels was taking comedians and turning them into sketch comedians, taking stand-up. So I actually didn't. I don't think I ever went and saw a live like stand-up comedy set until I had already done it.
Okay, because I was gonna say, at what point, having been aware of stand-up, did you say I want to try it?
Well, it was I was a big fan of podcasts, like when that started out. So Never Not Funny was a really big thing for me. Comedy Death Ray at the time, and now Comedy Bang Bang. Right. But Comedy Death Ray, I started listening to that podcast, and I got turned on to the fact that they had an iTunes sampler, or a CD. Comedy Death Ray CD was out there. And I was a really big Mr. Show fan at the time, so the only real stand-up that I used to listen to was like David Cross's records, just because I'm really, really big Mr. Show fan. And then modern stand-up, or actually going to see stand-up comedy, I always saw as distance. Like that's something you do when you're older and you drink, and it's always like the 2-drink minimum, and it's a bunch of people go on a date night and things like that. I've always viewed stand-up as something I kept very far away.
Yeah.
Like listened to on an album or, but never like thought about seeing it. And then when I actually started to become fans of comedians through podcasts, so listening to that Comedy Death Ray, you're going to hear like Paul F. Tompkins, David Cross is on there a bit, James Adomian might have been on there, but a bunch of, it was just a lot of people I had never heard do stand-up before in smaller bits. So the whole CD is like 3-minute bits. It's about 3 to 10-minute bits and like 20 different people I'd never heard of. And then I started following them through podcasts. And then when I got to Texas, in Houston, 1 year, I'd always done theater, and I always liked to be funny at a dinner table or whatever. Like, and people would come up and say, "Oh, like, you're really funny in a conversation." And then I always kind of wanted to do stand-up once I started listening to the podcasts a lot and going like, okay, this is what stand-up is. This is kind of what I want to do. I just made myself a New Year's resolution that 1 year I would do it. And a friend of a friend actually ran an open mic in Houston, Texas at Warehouse Live. They currently now, like 3 years later, own their own comedy club in Houston, that same group, which is really, really cool. It's great to see those guys take that little idea and really start to, hustle at comedy. But there was just a little open mic in Houston in the smallest room of a music venue, and that thing ran from 9 p.m. to 2:30 in the morning, and sometimes lists as long as like 50 to 60 people. Now you do stand up and just imagine like sitting through that. Yeah. And if you don't know anybody, I was very fortunate enough that the bartender was a friend of a friend, and so told the guy running the mic to put me on at a good spot. So I got to go up like number 22. And when you start stand up, you're like, you write all of your jokes and you practice them and practice them and practice them and practice them. And I went up and went well. And then if your first set goes really, really well, you can't stop. Like it's like, I guess, like people talk about doing hard drugs. It's like chasing that first high. And then I did a second set and it went well, and then I did a third set and it bombed horribly, and then I did another one, and then it was all the same jokes, and that one bombed horribly, and then you're like, I don't want to do this ever again, and then you pull yourself out of the works, and then you just keep doing it and keep doing it.
Subtle sizeism is a real thing because we're treated differently. And people over 6'5" are treated in a weird way. Like, sometimes I use it to my advantage, to be honest. I've tried to talk my way into airline seats, like exit row, need more. And I have said to the people at American Airlines, can you upgrade me to the exit row for free? I'm legally a giant. And they said, oh my God, that's beautiful. You can legally pay for the upgrade. So that's a little thing. The weird thing was I needed to get coveralls to work on my mother's farm, my roommate. I needed to get coveralls, and I went on Amazon, and I looked up coveralls, and then I added my size into the cart, which is 2X extra tall. And then I added these coveralls into my cart, and before I could check out, Amazon said customers that were interested in this product also bought knives and bleach. Like 20% of us are murderers, and that's not fair.
Then I took a long break after doing it in Houston. Luckily enough to know some really talented people that let me be on a couple festivals and shows, and got to meet some really big stand-up heroes of mine. Nice. And watch those guys grow. When I came to Washington, I took a little break from it, and then had a lot of bad stuff happen in my life, and then kind of went back into stand-up up in Bellingham at the Green Frog. And it was very welcoming, and it also reminded me that I had to redo everything that I thought was funny, because the stuff that worked in Texas and the stuff I've been doing for a long time was old. It's like literally, like, I didn't like it as much anymore. I think it kind of told the audience is different in different places, and you kind of had to like rework everything. So
okay, from when you started to on and off, how long have you actually been performing now?
About 3 years, three and a half.
Okay.
Yeah.
So was the move to Texas precipitated by, it was career-based, job-based?
Yeah, I was man. Yeah, it was a job, but not a job that people move across the country for. Like
Right.
it was just the weirdest. Just packed up everything into a U-Haul and then just went to
How long have you been married at
Austin.
that point?
I was married for 6 months at that point.
Okay.
I was almost divorced within 6 months too. So
Wow.
it was a big change up of that commitment kind of thing.
So how did you meet your wife?
She was my boss at Hot Topic in the Cascade Mall. Yeah, I slept my way up the ladder to middle management. Yeah, no, she was my boss. I was like, it was one of the 3 jobs I was working at the time while I was also going to school full time, and we just hit it off. Just worked, just worked together, made fun of the same things for a while, and then we just kind of went and saw like a movie one night, like after work, and then hung out like a little bit later after that. It was kind of more of her leading the charge. I'm pretty aloof most of the time when it comes to ladies, so yeah, she was my boss.
Yeah.
And then because Hot Topic has a very, very strict no fraternization policy, you can't even hang out outside of work.
Really?
Yeah. During that time, I was dating her, and then later we both moved into the apartment of the assistant manager. So she was the key holder. So yeah, like for their whole rules, like 2 were dating, 3 were all living together. And then because we never told anybody, she quit to go work somewhere else, and now her position was open, and the DM thought it would be the best idea to just put me and her. So because she quit, I got that job, and
It all kind of worked
ran a
out.
scam.
So,
God, that's a sad story. So sad. Like looking back, like teenage, or not even teenage, 20-year-old key holder at Hot Topic.
I loved video games growing up, and I had to stop playing them because I got really addicted to them. And now getting back into it, so much has changed that I can't handle it. First off, you get trophies, which is the weirdest thing. Like, the game awards you for playing the game, and I get addiction mentality. But it's not healthy. Because it's no longer giving you, like, it has to keep giving you awards. And I got an award the other day, and I felt that good feeling that you're supposed to feel. But it was not for being the best at a thing, right? It's not like for most headshots or fastest racer. I got an award, literally said, PlayStation popped up, it was like, you won a trophy, Marathon Man. And that made me feel fantastic. I'm the best at this game, guys. I'm the Marathon Man. I'm like the guy you can count on, go the furthest. And then I clicked on that trophy and said, you've won this award for playing Grand Theft Auto Online, the equivalent of 6 Earth days. That's the saddest trophy you could possibly win. They should have just not Marathon Man, they should have said Life Non-Participation Ribbon. That would have been way more accurate.
you moved to Austin and then you started doing stand-up. Did your wife come with you to see you do stand-up? And, like, what did she think of your stand-up?
She did support me. The first time I went by myself, she was like agoraphobic, so real big fear of crowds, which is weird for someone that works retail. But anxiety came and go, like it was a lot of stuff. So getting her to come out and do anything was a little rough. There was a few times that she did come out and watch me do stand-up. She always liked my worst jokes, like the dumbest stuff, which is where, like, it's funny because I get very gleeful when I'm doing really, really dumb things because everything in comedy, I think, is retroactive. Like you have to build a joke in reverse. So almost everything I do is a funny conversation I'm having with a friend of mine, like that I'm a little bit behind it, so I actually get to laugh because I feel that it's gonna sound dumb, but my brain's a little bit behind myself. I'm a little bit quicker when you're working in a mindset of comedy where you have to be fluid, like the comedy podcasts, things like that, or on stage or improv, where you're actually not thinking. That's what they always say. And so you're actually a little bit behind yourself. Those are always when I laugh the absolute hardest, is those situations where you actually surprise yourself. And then stand up, I find you have to just retroactively, you have to take that funny moment and then find a way to lie to get to that moment. So that funny real thing that happened, that spontaneous moment, you have to now put in a premise to get you to there.
Right.
Like, it's still funny. The thing is always going to be funny, that real pure moment. The art of it is actually going back and finding the map to get to the funny thing. So you're not just saying the dumbest thing you've ever said in your life with no context.
Yeah.
But when she would come out, on the sometimes that she would come and support, I would always do 2 jokes that I never tell anymore. One I would tell because I'd have to have her in the audience. It's a really, I always found it dumb. Most people get really tight about it because it's slightly misogynistic, which is not the kind of humor I like to do anymore. But it was just is more a downplay on myself, and it was when Anthony Jeselnik was getting really big at the time. So that really brass, bold jerk humor was becoming like a thing, and so, but it was always good to have her in the audience because it was so I stopped drinking recently, and because my wife told me that when I drink heavily, I'm incredibly cruel to women, and so I stopped, and turns out it's still fun, like which people don't like that joke. Which is understandable. I don't even like that joke, but having her in the audience, I go like, that person you hear laughing is my wife, so don't worry. Like, she thinks it's funny. She knows it's a joke. You guys can all laugh. Like, but I don't know. You've come to comedy shows with partners before. Sometimes it's actually nice. Like, I think if you've got somebody that enjoys your sense of humor for real, then having them come to a comedy show, or especially every one of them, is not the best thing.
No,
because they see you come up with it. They know the real moment when you were genuinely funny, and they're watching you fakely create that moment that used to be like special.
Yeah.
And so and then also, I don't know, they know you rather intimately, and people on stage are enjoying a character that you're playing off as real,
right,
and they think they can see through that. So it's actually kind of not super helpful a lot of times, because you might be like cock of the walk, like have a really good set, but if you're up on the stage and someone's like watching that knows how you're gonna freak out on the car ride home about like the 3 people that didn't laugh or whatever. I mean, do you find that?
I suppose so. I mean, it's, when I met my long-term girlfriend, I did not tell her I did stand up on the first date. I think it slipped out on the second date at one point. But It was like, it's not like I'm gonna like, what do you do? Well, I'm a comedian. Like, that's not,
No.
It's like, unless I'm making a real living as a comedian, I'm not gonna like, necessarily volunteer that information. Yeah. I mean, I guess the other thing is you could meet people through comedy, where some girl sees you have a really nice set, and somehow, I don't know. I mean,
that's the worst.
That's the worst.
It's the worst. Oh my God. Yeah, that's just me though. I mean, when I was single for a bit, doing stand-up, the thing is, man, it's just a weird lead-in, because the only people that I want, like, I don't know, it's gonna sound such terrible, but the laughs that I'm going for are from the comedians in the place that I really like. And I do love it when people will come up and be like, oh, it was a really good set. And you go, oh, thanks. But if it's like someone that's like, hey, you were really funny, and then want to like talk to me more of like a stranger, I was like, I didn't do that for you. I did it for the comedians. I'm trying to impress the people I think are funny. And I'm just, that's awful. That's true, but it's, I don't know. If you do a good stand-up set and you meet somebody, like comes up and like tells you like you're funny, and then like wants to talk to you more, it's a weird.
It is weird.
It's weird.
I've had very attractive women before I did a really good set, who I might see them in passing or say hi to them, and they're like, oh hey, and then you do a really good set, and they come up to you and they're like all chatty, and you're like, this is weird. Now you somehow find me attractive in some way, I guess. I don't know. It's weird.
Yeah, I don't.
But I don't. I think once you do stand up enough, it's like, you're not doing it to pick up chicks. This is if you're going to comedy to pick up chicks, you have chosen poorly. You choose. I don't know. It's yeah.
Plus the type of stand-up I do is not. I remember talking with Kyle Ingberg about that because I was single at the time. Kyle has a long-term girlfriend, and we were talking about that, how it's like where the real laughs matter, and like the meeting. I don't know, like the type of comedy that I was doing at the time. We joked. It was like I think I got off stage. It was like I should probably have more jokes about being confident and attractive. That would be better than going up there and being like, God, this is a terrible. Like just like for the longest time, my set for like I did 25 minutes at the Frog once about just being the saddest, like just listing off all of the sad.
Yeah.
Alex McKay told me once, just like, why do you just go up there as this preamble of all this terrible stuff? And I was like, it's cathartic. Mm-hmm. It's and if anyone was attracted to that, that is the biggest red flag. I'm up there talking about like how bad of a human being I am, like, or like not even who I am, like not like on the external of a bad human being, but like how like these jokes come from the dark spots in the brain that you don't act on.
Yeah.
And then that's why it's funny, because you're not acting on it. And if someone came up that was like super attracted to this quote unquote damaged goods, it's like, oh no, then that's not okay. Like that's
no, yeah, that is a big red flag.
Don't want to hitch your ride to a mistake.
Oh man, yeah, I feel like I don't know. I feel like there's only. I mean, like self-deprecation is definitely a good thing, but yeah, I mean, depending on how dark you go, there's if people respond a certain way to that. That's not a good.
No,
that's a concern.
That's a. Like, I'm the messed up one. I don't need someone that wants to fix me, or like, because you're only trying to fix me because you're way more messed up.
Yeah.
That's the secret. If you're working on me, you're not working on you.
If you're looking at that guy thinking, here's someone slightly less messed up than me, let's do this. Like, I don't know, that's not a good.
I don't want to spend the next weeks of my life having to watch The Nightmare Before Christmas on Blu-ray or something.
I went out and I've gone on a couple dates, and things are just strange. Like, things are kind of weird. I was with this girl. We went out for drinks here, strangely enough. And she went up to use the restroom, and she took her coaster and put it on top of her glass while we were having drinks, enjoying a grilled cheese together. She got up, put a coaster on her glass, and went to the bathroom. I stayed at the table. Now, I know that's a symbol to bartenders that you're coming back for them to not take your drink. But I was there, and when she came back, I said, hey, would you put your coaster on your glass? And she said, oh, it's just something I do to make sure that you don't roofie me. Which was rude, but also dumb. Because I was unaware that rapists can't lift cardboard. It's not vampire rules, lady.
You were married, you moved to Texas.
Yep.
And, I mean, when did things kind of start falling apart?
No relationship's perfect. From externally, like I said, if most people saw, like if I was to really tell you all of the bad things that happened over a 10-year marriage, then as most of my friends came up to me and said, like, what are you doing? This is a bad decision. But so to say like things fell apart, things never started great. Like,
so
that's
the foundation's
I was wondering,
rocky. Did the dissolution of your marriage, was something that caught you off guard, or was it kind of on rocky ground?
It caught me off guard because I thought that we were doing the work to make it last a lot longer. From an external viewpoint, there was really no reason that our marriage should have lasted as long as it did. And I still feel like in the back of most of my family's head, like most of my friends' head, like nobody thought that we would be like together. It just didn't make a whole lot of sense because they only saw the external, which was my ex-wife was very very one-on-one doesn't like a whole lot of people, small groups. And when you're the center of that focus, that's a really great place to be, but nobody else sees that. You put her in groups, which is family gatherings, things like that. Very standoffish, very antisocial, which is the opposite of me for the most part. When I work well in groups. The only reason I go and do stand-up is I like telling jokes that I think like make me laugh, but the big draw is to go and hang out with comedians, like hang out back walking around, like just coming up with premises and riffing on stuff with people that share the same mindset as you. So people always see me like I've been in bands, I've done theater, I've done stand-up, I've worked in sales for most of my adult life. So large groups of people, or even one-on-one relationships with strangers, I'm very, very good at. It's kind of like my wheelhouse. She was the exact opposite. So, I don't know. So from an external viewpoint, it should have never worked. And then on an internal viewpoint, it takes a lot for me to get committed to an idea. I'm very standoffish, I'd say. I'm like a long fuse kind of thing. But once I am committed to an idea, I like the whole cloth idea of it. It was religion when I was growing up. I grew up in the church. I still have my cross tattoo and whatever. But I used to do like youth ministry, and I tried really hard, and I tried the best to be the best at church. I don't know if you can be the best at church. And so
I'm the best at church. Everybody knows.
Everybody knows. Oh, it's a huge church. Like, I pray so well. I'm the best prayer.
I read all the books. All the books of the Bible.
All the books. All of the Acts. All 4 of the letters to the Corinthians. I think I went to Sanders for a second. That wasn't even Trump. But that concept kind of went down in my marriage. So same thing is I believed a lot in church, and then when that fell out, it's probably almost impossible for me to go back. But there is that catalyst that happens that you can roll with anything, and it can hurt, and you might in your head know that it's wrong or whatever. But because of the big idea, it's how you grow. You always think to yourself like, yeah, this is part of it. This is part of it. And religion is that thing. A lot of time is that this doesn't make sense, or this hurts, or this causes a lot of pain, but it's part of the whole. And the longer I go, I get past these little things, and then I'll get the big picture. And I kind of did that same mentality towards my marriage. Mm-hmm. I really didn't like who I was in like high school and college, especially when it came to like dating and things like that. I was actually not that great of a dude. I was for a couple people, and then when I hit into college, I was just kind of not super great. Just very distant, not very emotionally open to a lot of people, and that can hurt a lot. So when I got married and decided when she asked me to get married, and when I said yes, I kind of committed to that idea whole cloth, and we should have gotten divorced at least 3 or 4 times between that, but the fact that I was married made it more that little caveat of the title change made you kind of go through those things. And I tell people all the time, people would tell me like, the second time my wife had cheated on me, like, they're like, why are you still around? Like, why are you still putting up with this? It's like, well, because I said this is what it is, and we, that whole death do us part, Richard Poor, like, batter, like, yeah, I can roll through, but as long as I see that legitimate change, like, want to happen, then that's part of it. Like, it's part of that's part, to me, how commitment works.
Right.
And it's saying, like, people are not perfect, and yeah, that sucks, and they didn't hold up their end of the bargaining, but the whole concept of love is not to demand the love that you want to see from other people, but to show the love that you want to see from other people. And if you can't expect, like, if you can't give that, then the fact that you can't ask for it isn't the same thing. I've always felt that emotionally I can take a lot of damage. I can take a bunch of hits, and my ex-wife could not take a lot of hits. And so it's that, I don't know, she had a bad past. I tried really hard to be a part of showing, hopefully showing the real example of what I wanted to exist. It's like that Sartre rule, like, all good in the world, all bad in the world exists only because you allow it. And so, I mean, it hit ahead, but to answer your question in long form, I wanted to make sure that was on the precedent of why everything kind of went the way it did. Once we moved back to Washington, I had sold the house that I bought because she wanted a house. I put every drop of paint, every rendition of it was done by us and mostly me. So she wanted a house. We got a house. Said that she do this job, make more money. So we did that. Said we should go to Disney World. I do not like the Disney Corporation. I had a fun time, but it's not the place I would ever choose to go. But we went twice in like 2 years. Like, did all these things to try to make her happy. And then she felt stuck in Texas, and so I got a job offer in Washington and decided to move back home. I really wanted to, but also she really, really wanted to.
You were in Texas for how long?
10 years.
10 years, wow.
Yeah.
So then you got the opportunity to move back to Bellingham specifically?
Yeah.
Okay.
But we moved back and had to go back to living in an apartment because just didn't have the money to buy a house right away. In Texas, you can buy a house. In Washington, you can rent a shed for the same money. So it just took a little bit of legwork. Or a little bit of legwork, and I had to work, and she had to find new jobs, and then it kind of felt like a full circle because we were right back where we were like a decade ago, to the point where she started getting reached out by her ex-boyfriend, who was the boyfriend that was right before me, and started dating, and then they started a thing that I found out about, and it was like, I literally can't do this anymore. Like, at some point you hit a breaking point. Like, at some point there's literally like, well, I can forgive, but I can't. I have to at one point like myself enough to not go through this anymore.
Yeah.
And that was the long and short for the dissolution. Is just like, there's a lot of stuff I could take. That particular one is because I found the transcripts between the two of them talking, and while a lot of therapists have told me that people will say whatever they want, like, people need to justify their actions. So they'll try to pawn things up as being bigger as they are. And so, especially when it comes to affairs. But the one of saying, like, there was a lot of talk of that 10 years ago she was angry at him and in a weird headspace and married me to get back at him, and the last 10 years had been like a lie, which I was like, can't be. That's like, you're talking like a decade. And if it was anybody else in the world, like literally 7 billion people on the planet, any of those other ones, I probably could have rolled with it. But being the person that was right before me, is just like, oh, see, I thought this was a decade of a thing and not a mistake you had made that I kind of had to facilitate for 10 years. Like, being anybody's wrong choice for a decade is a tough thing to take. And so I remember we sat down, I texted her while she was at work because I had found out about it. She'd lied about going to stay at her sister's in Portland while I was out kayaking the Nooksack with my dad. And I found out that she'd actually got a hotel and in Seattle, and then I found, when I got home, I found she's still logged in as Facebook and this messages, and I can't not pry, whatever. And so I just sent a message at work. It's like, you might want to come home. It's like, I'm working. It's like, you're getting divorced today, you might want to come home.
I also no longer have my dogs. I let my wife keep my dogs that I raised since they were kids, and so I needed a new pet. I needed to fill that void in my heart. But also, divorces are very expensive, so money was a little tight. I decided to get a chameleon, right? So I went into Petco and I saw they had a chameleon with a cage for $100. And then I saw that the cages are $50. So now I am the owner of the world's most talented chameleon and $50 extra.
So you filed for divorce?
Oh, yeah. It was done.
I mean, she cheated on you 3 times, is that correct?
Yeah, 3 times over 10 years. So yeah, I no longer had a house. I was living in an apartment in Washington, and then we had to still live together for, it takes 90 days to dissolve a marriage in Washington, and she literally had nowhere else to go. And I don't know. I have a hard time being the worst person even when it's justified.
Yeah.
I just can't. I don't know.
I guess more than Those 90 days, would you characterize that less as like contentious and more as just sad, or what?
Oh, it was a hellscape, man.
Yeah.
Yeah, like you saw the sets the last year. Like a lot of that stuff I talk about is true, but I mean, you talk to anybody that goes through something like that. Literally, I got down to my like lowest weight. I was super unhealthy. I wasn't sleeping. I wasn't eating. I was sent home from work. Like being the boss there, my team had like to send me home because I was comatose. I was on mood stabilizers that were just so I could literally get through the day. But there was times I would get home from work and just collapse on the floor, like unable to move for hours. I just sat and watched Community, Dan Harmon show, and it was like everything to get through the day. She spent most of her, like any of her free time, staying at her friend's quote unquote's house, somewhere else that wasn't his place, and then just had to wait for the papers to go through for her new place so they could move out.
When you, as far as how stand-up factors into this, when you moved back to Bellingham, when you moved back here, you pretty much weren't doing stand-up anymore, right? I mean,
no,
you stopped.
I was working a lot, going through other things. I was dealing with a severe bout of alcoholism at the time. I was on like a kind of a little bender, and then I cleaned myself up, lost a bunch of weight, got back in shape, and then once I was healthy again, that's when everything started to go bad, like for the next month. But I didn't really focus on comedy because most comedy takes place in a bar, and that's tough for me to not to go, get that liquid confidence. So I was just avoiding it. And then I had done stand-up at Laughs in Kirkland a few times at the open mic there. It's not there anymore. I think they moved it to the U District.
They did, yeah.
Just to get my feet wet again. And then anytime I'd go back to Texas to visit friends, I would do stand-up out there because that was my crew, and they know me, and I was trying out new stuff. And I kind of did Laughs a few times, and I kind of fell out of love with stand-up because I was just like, man, I really don't, like, rebuilding yourself.
Yeah.
It's really hard to get good spots in open mics. It's really hard to be comfortable enough with your own voice and kind of fight through that and get people to know you again so you feel comfortable and you can try new stuff that you like. And so I did it a little bit while we were married, and then after, I took a massive amount of time off because I couldn't function for I mean, it was just like talking to people was the hardest thing I had to do.
I mean,
so
when you were going through the divorce, or when things were not going well, I mean, of the few times you tried stand-up, I mean, did you try to do jokes about what was going on in your personal life, or was it simply too painful?
It wasn't too, I mean, like during the divorce I kind of fell back on the silly stuff.
Okay.
I do two different styles. I can go up there and do like one-liners, which is just puns. It's puns, really silly wordplay, looking at stuff in a different way.
Google, record video, that sort of stuff. Right?
Oh, yeah. I like that joke.
I like it a lot.
That came from a real place.
I found out that it's incredibly difficult to convince a person that your safe word is okay Google record video.
Because I was sitting around playing with my phone and checking out all the different things you could do, and it's like, there is no, like, that happened. I said, okay, Google record video, and it goes bloop and starts recording video, and it's like, there is no way that has not been used by some creep somewhere. Yep. But no, like the silly stuff, a lot of when I did finally start doing it again, I relied heavily on that silly stuff. And I liked it, but it didn't feel real to me. And then more of the act became like personal. And then I really started to get, once I got comfortable again, I was doing a preamble at the beginning of sets, I would just list off all of the bad things that had happened within the week, because shortly after that I had gotten laid off from my job. So as soon as I moved out of that apartment that we had for like 2 more months, when she got into her place and I moved out of the apartment, I had to move back home because I got an online job so I could work from home. I had to move back into my old bedroom at my mother's place just to stay afloat, because I had to inherit a decade's worth of credit card debt onto my shoulders for 2 people. And she took care of some of it, but I wanted it all gone within a year. So I had to sign off everything I was making. I'm talking 80% of my paycheck went to paying off that. So I had to consolidate, and I sold off everything I owned, everything I had collected in 10 years. The only thing I had left of anything that was for fun was from my guitar. But I mean, I had an extensive record collection, like limited edition, signed stuff, big, like really nice record player, Lego Death Star, the Lego Batman tumbler, like all of the things that you collect when you're a 30-year-old man, and with disposable income. So I had to sell all of that stuff off on the cheap, and I liquidated my life to the point where I only everything I own fits in a closet or in the back of my car. So there was that, and I was living at home, and then I got laid off, which I like to think like fired. I got promoted into a department that they had already decided that they were going to cut at the end of the year, like, which that's according to like contracts and stuff, that's not true but it from people who have worked there and said like, yeah, they had already decided that they were letting you guys go. So I had just gotten divorced. I no longer owned my house in Texas. I just got laid off from my job. So I ran out of my health insurance. The last thing I found out when I got like my last checkout, found out that I had a pre-melanoma like mole on me, and I had to get that removed, and most of it wasn't covered. So like there's this every week when I went up and did stand up at the Green Frog, I basically started the premises with like, hey, in the last year, this and happened, and like literally people would gasp, like that was the start of the set. People were like, whoa, and we're like, and I was like, it's okay, and then I would always go, oh guys, it's okay, I've written jokes, and I would try to talk about some of that stuff, like, because, yeah, I mean, comedy is therapy, but there's got to be the jokes there.
But then you look yourself in the mirror and you go, I need to manufacture a look. I need to get back out there. Apparently the look I chose was Thor's accountant.
I remember distinctly when my act changed. I was at a conference for the company that I worked at before I'd gotten fired. I had just gotten divorced. I was at a conference, and
this was a company different from Vans, right?
This is a company different from Vans. This is a furniture company called Lovesac, and we were at a manager's meeting. So I'd still worked for them. I had just gotten divorced and was just living in an apartment with nothing in it. And a friend of mine that I worked with, we were all sitting around at this conference table at the meeting. And it was when Coca-Cola was doing that campaign. It was like share a Coke with, and then each one had like a name or something like that. And he was just sitting across from me, and he's like, he turned his Coke and said, share a Coke with a best friend. And I just looked down at mine, and I turned it, and it said, share a Coke with your significant other. And then I just looked at him, and he was like, like he started like grimace, like to think I was gonna cry. And I looked at him and was like, oh, no, there's nothing I find more amusing than my misery. Which is kind of like saying that out loud is like, there's nothing that I find funnier than that. And I started to do it at family gatherings because no one would talk about it. No one would ask, like, so I would always have to bring it up because I knew people were thinking about it. Like I'd buy presents for all the kids at like Christmas, and my grandpa would be like, oh wow, you did all this shopping by yourself? Like you went out and picked all these gifts out for the kids? Like, yeah, I did. Man, I'm really impressed. Like you went out and bought all of these presents. So like, no, Grandpa, I had my wife do it. Like just I have to be the one that called out the elephant in the room every time. And I found like gaining that control about it, like making fun of myself, making fun of my, what I was going through, like all of that bad stuff kind of gave me a sense to, I don't know. I was told Alex McKay, like comedian, that he told me never. He's like, you gotta stop doing that preamble. You're bumming everybody out. And I'm like, no, but it's cathartic because at the end, like it's a 5-minute set. You have, I don't have time to do the entire Joseph Campbell story circle here. Like I don't have time to bring the elixir back to the people. All I can do is burn the world down. like I've got to start you there. I can't set you up for me. Like I've got to start the audience at the bare, like like at that time I had to start them absolutely low, but 100% true, so that we could laugh at those things together, rather than be like, oh, here's a joke about this, and here's a joke about this, and here's a joke about this, and you learn more and more, and it's like, here's all the bad stuff, and that way when we get to the end where the punchlines are, people are not only laughing because hopefully it's funny, but they're laughing as a cathartic release because I'm laughing at the whole thing. They felt bad because I felt bad, and now we're hopefully all feeling good together. So
for you, it's really, so you feel like after you went through enough stuff that sort of creating something funny from that emotional pain would you say it's become easier? Is that fair? Or
yeah, it's actually been a lot harder to write comedy as of late because I'm happy. I travel for a living. Like I got a new job. I travel for a living. One of my locations is Hawaii. People like do not like have any sympathy for me like whatsoever. I got my finances in order. I've got a girlfriend who's great. We've been seeing each other for a while now, and you know, it's. So that being said, it's much more difficult to write jokes, at least for me. I mean, I could still go up and pretend, but it doesn't feel as genuine if I'm going up and being like, oh, I'm a sad guy, feel bad for me. Like, I think a lot of the jokes still work, but I don't know. That's the thing too. The jokes have to be there. There's enough. You've seen enough comedy where there's people could go up and just tell like a 6-minute sad story about them masturbating, and then you're like, okay, where's the jokes?
Yeah.
Like, are there jokes in there?
When people see tall people, they kind of want to know if everything matches and if things line up with the body. And we don't know each other very well, and I don't want to be crass and I don't want to be rude up here, but the words are true. Sorry, man. What am I going to say? I'm 6'7". I have a size 16 shoe. Yes, I do have a much shorter life expectancy than the average human.
So, I mean, obviously things are going well for you now, but I guess you kind of touched on this earlier, but I mean, at this point, if things are going well, why do you keep doing stand-up? Do you feel that you need to keep doing it to keep yourself in a good place mentally, or is it's more about just socializing with other comics? Or
honestly, I don't like doing stand-up as much. I mean, I do. I really like coming up with bits, and that's the process I like, because, and you do it for a while, which is like, I don't even hit Seattle up or anything like that. I just do stand-up where I want to do stand-up. I find like I like getting part of a community and being part of that group, and and watching people grow and try stuff, and I like to be a part of that because I don't want to be someone that's up doing. I don't like to be around people that are literally growing and getting their voice if I'm not trying to do the same thing. So for right now, it's doing it on nights where I think it'll be fun to do. And then, you know, I just want to make sure that I'm keeping up with the kids. Like, I'm 33 and see some really, really talented young people coming up with a completely different concept of stand-up. Like, most of the stand-ups that we see, especially in this town, it's weird that you can't pinpoint them to a voice a lot of times. It's a weird kind of thing where I'm starting to see that more stand-ups are being influenced by no one, or they're being influenced by other locals more than they're being influenced by like the big names or the people. Like, it hardly seems like if you would ask a bunch of the new startups like, who's your favorite stand-up comedians, they might not be able to name one. It just they go to a mic and they go like, oh, I'd like to do that, and it feels that makes the community smaller. But I really like that because the cream will rise to the top. Like, people will try out, they'll find their own voice, and they'll get good, and maybe hopefully they'll like move on and do like a big name and things like that. But for me, I know that most likely I'm never gonna be a professional stand-up comedian because I think that I'm good enough to entertain, and so that I have fun and the audience has fun, and people come up and say good set and things like that. I like to be consistent because I enjoy the people that we do this with, the people that run the rooms. My motivation will always be to do a good job because you let me do this. Like, you asked me to come up, or I've asked you to come up, and we trust each other, and that's why I do stand up. So cathartically, not really. My joy as going forward is to put eyes on people that I think are really funny. Like to get groups, like to host, to create shows, things like that, and kind of make sure that the people that I think are genuinely like really talented and much more talented than I am have an appropriate space to and get more people to watch them be really great.
Right.
That's what I like to do.
Cool.
And I don't know if that's cathartic, but I find that joy, like
being a show producer and show host is a very satisfying thing to
Yeah.
say. Here's these very funny people, laugh at them.
yeah, it's like because because comedy is super important, and comedy can be very therapeutic, and it can be very helpful for people to get those messages out, but they've got to have, I don't know, like, and the best I can do is I don't really need that anymore. I don't need to tell jokes to remind myself that I can talk again, or to make light of something that's actually really dark. And so the least you can do is like help others do that same thing. And then, I don't know, just try to be funnier than them. Like, find the best people, and then and then let them go through their thing, and then and try to top them, because it's all a selfish game, and you got to be number one. Who's gonna get that golden mic, Matt?
It's golden
Who's
mic.
gonna get that golden mic, Matt?
We've got 2 silver mics in front. I don't know. That's like, yeah, it's silver.
MXL 990s.
So I was going to ask you, because you do frequently travel, do you feel that has helped your stand-up at all in regard to either how often you get to perform or the wider perspective of visiting all these different comedy scenes?
No, like, it's the worst. Unless you're traveling for, like, everyone says that, like, oh, you got the best thing. You can go out and get your name out and go meet people and things like that. And it's like, comedy's a rough game, especially when you have a different job to do. Like, if I was working a 9 to 5 Monday through Friday here in Bellingham, then I could set my schedule to go like, oh, okay, I'm going to do this on this night. Like, I know that I got to show up at this time to get on this mic, or I'm going to try to do this one. It's hard for me to get booked on shows because
you're out of town.
Producers, I'm asked, if I get asked to be on a show, then I say, well, actually, that's the one weekend that's the one weekend I'm not in town, or that's the one day I'm not in town. And then you have to say that 2 or 3 times, and then you don't get asked anymore. I've done comedy in Hawaii. I've done comedy in Portland. I've always avoided Vegas because when I'm in Vegas, I lock myself in my hotel room and do like yoga and and meditation, and just like I don't like Vegas.
You try to keep the sin out of your personal experience in Sin City.
Not sin. It's not sin. It's
Vice.
boredom. Oh
Boredom?
my God, vices are so boring. It's just instantly bored. Because it's just so available and gross and nitty, and I just work. But it's nice to see the scenes in Portland, and then the comedy scene in Hawaii, at least that I saw, is not my scene. But like I said, it's unless you're as outgoing enough to latch on to the showrunners or things like that, or try to build a relationship, or try to hang out afterwards, then I don't see the joy in doing it a lot of the time. Because if I'm working 9 to 5, go back to the hotel, and then to go to a bar where nobody knows you, or you can't, like, even if I could list off credits, it does not help you get a better spot on the list. And then all of a sudden you're sitting through their community, which is a lot of the time. Like, it's tough for me because comedy is not what I do for a living. It's what I do for fun. And if it starts to be not fun, if it's like, well, I got to work at 9 a.m, it's 12:35. I'm number 26 on this list. And by the time I go up, all of the comedians that I would want to be friends with have done their sets and left. And that's a lot of time, like, tough. Like, so yeah, I mean, not to be boo-hoo about traveling, but for comedy-wise, it's not the easiest thing.
Okay.
It's a tight game out there. There's a lot of comics and a lot of people doing a lot of really good stuff, and to get out there and shine, a lot of things have to go right. And for traveling, for me, a lot of things don't go super right to make it fun. So.
Okay.
Don't do hobbies unless they're fun, kids. That's the advice I have.
Okay. All right. So you are one of you're a co-producer of the Way North comedy show.
Yes.
And that is a monthly show that goes on at Farmstrong Brewing down in Mount Vernon.
Yes, I'm the founder and co-producer.
So
Way North Comedy.
The first show was incredible. There was like 100 people in the audience.
We can't say how many people there were.
We can't say.
There was a lot.
There were, yeah. I mean, I'm generalizing.
Sure. It's just for legal reasons. We can't talk about how many people showed up to that.
Okay.
Thing. Fun thing I like about that show is we have an hour of feature and headline sets up front. I'll be hosting. And then we take a break, and then we finish out the night with a really strong open mic. So last time was really fun because we kept 85% of the audience from the headliner spot. Mm-hmm. So 7 p.m. Farmstrong, April 9th, and then going forward, we will be the third Sunday of every month at Farmstrong.
Okay.
Little brewery right underneath the I-5 bridge in Mount Vernon. You cross the Skagit River and take that first exit, and you're there.
You'll see it off to the right when you're on the highway. So.
Yeah, the old Sears building.
So, I mean, the one thing I was gonna ask all the comics, because we're treading on slightly dark ground occasionally, is like what's the well, first off, what do you fear most?
What do I fear most?
What, throw that out there.
You mean like spiders or what? What do you mean?
It could be anything. I mean, I guess, what are some of your great fears in life? I mean, either it doesn't have to be a phobia necessarily, but
well, we'll do two. Okay. One, my real fear is the concept of infinity. Ever since I was like, even in like church, that scared the crap out of me. Like hell was as terrifying to me as heaven because both never ended, and that like anytime I think about the concept of this full circle, like that everything continues for forever and matter just becomes other matter. We're human beings. We're not supposed to deal with that kind of stuff. And those thoughts always just like, that's super scary. That terrifies me. Because it's just like, it'll just happen again and again and again. But I guess my greatest fear is hypnotism. I went and saw that movie Get Out, and if you've seen the trailer, not to be a spoiler, but like hypnotism plays like a pretty big part in that. And ever since I was a kid, and Mowgli gets hypnotized by Kaa in the Jungle Book, like the loss of control scares the crap out of me. Mm-hmm. Like when you see this character that you like in a movie, like just become this empty shell that does whatever it's being told, is so scary. And Disney like Snakes hypnotize everybody, apparently, according to Disney, because it's Jungle Book. Yeah. It's also in Robin Hood that snake hypnotizes King John, and then the Jafar's scepter is also a snake.
That's right. Yeah.
All the hypnotizing that happens, not all, maybe all of it, is all snakes. So yeah, so hypnotism scares me on a dumb level. Like,
you've never been hypnotized, then? You would never try to be hypnotized?
I was hypnotized one time in high school, and it was by a friend of mine who was just trying it out. And all of us happened was I lost count. Like when they do the countdown thing and you stare at a candle, like I went from, like he was counting down, and I still think he might have been lying to me that they went from 8 and then just skipped to 1 because I missed 7 through 2. And then one time at a class trip, they like the entertainment was a hypnotist, and I went up and they have a group of 10, and he tries and he gets the ones that he keeps the ones that are hypnotized and lets everyone sit down, and I had to be sat down because I did not get hypnotized.
What's the closest you've ever come to death? Accidental or whichever.
accidental deaths happen to me, like close calls all the time. I remember the youngest was when I was a kid, and my dad took us up to Mount Baker, hauling a trailer on the back of a 1992 Toyota Corolla, and decided that going up to the actual sledding zone would be a little too expensive or busy, so he was going to pull off on a side road with no chains. And then I remember my mother looking back at my sister and I and saying, "Hey guys, I need you to go to the passenger side. I need you to go to your dad's side, and I'm just going to open the door, and you're going to get out, and I'm going to crawl into the back seat, and I'm going to go out with you, and we're all going to stand next to the car, okay? So I just, really, just quickly and quietly, I need you to just open the door and go outside and stand." And I was like, okay. And then we got outside and stood next to my mother because the trailer had kicked over the side of a cliff because the car had no traction on it and was starting to pull the car, us, and my father off the side of the cliff.
Whoa.
Because he chanced it. And I remember watching my dad, fight, he maneuvering to get this, and he actually saved it. But there was a point where it was he had the door open, the driver's side door open, ready to tuck and roll if that thing was going to go. Wow. And we would have just been stranded up there. Nobody knew we were up there. We were on a side road. Just would have been either off the side of a cliff. So, that was a near death.
I like the question, what do you fear most, though? Because that could be anything. I was talking to someone yesterday who said they have an irrational fear of goldfish. They don't know why. They just, and it's not seeing, it's in person. If they're around, they just get clammy. It's a weird, so it's you could be afraid of something that's rational or irrational.
My irrational one is bees, man. I will run.
You don't know if you're allergic?
No, I mean I've gotten stung before, and I've swollen up, not my entire body, but the area I've gotten stung has swollen up, which I would imagine would happen. You're experiencing pain, your body's reacting to it.
Yep.
But I am irrationally afraid of bees. If a bee comes, I will I'll do my body will start to move in a bunch of different ways, and I'll contort, and then I'll just run. I've torn out a car stereo system out of my car once on accident because a bee was in my car, and I moved so quick that I had latched my hand around the cassette adapter and ripped out my entire stereo system just getting away from a bee. It's just stupid. Bees terrify me.
Have a good night, Bellingham.